Hello, my name is Jonathan Lin. I am a portfolio manager, wealth advisor, and certified financial planner at BMO Nesbitt Burns and Private Wealth, which is the investment arm at the Bank of Montreal. I am humbled and honored to host Jean-Pierre Laporte and Dr. Vu Tran to highlight some of the drawbacks of the new HOOPS initiative to entice incorporated doctors to join the defined benefit program. They will share with you some background, the disadvantages for physicians by joining the program, and what would be a better and more viable alternative to optimize your financial health. By way of introduction, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Vu Tran, who is an emergency, family, and long-term care physician with an interest in personal finance. He has always been looking out for financial solutions for his peers. He is the founder of How is My Financial Health, Doc? Podcast that highlights the personal financial journeys of physicians and providers in healthcare and what they go through. His goal is to help healthcare professionals reach financial wellness sooner. With this vision in mind, he co-founded the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. His professional and business partner, Jean-Pierre Laporte, is a pension lawyer who has practiced for over 20 years in Canada. He is also the treasurer of the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan and the CEO of Integris Pension Management Corporation. For his efforts at helping Canadians save for retirement, he was awarded the prestigious Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal by the Governor General in Canada in 2012. Gentlemen, I'll leave it up to you to take the reins.
Thank you. So we'll start with what is HOOPP? Some people have seen the acronym. It stands for Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan. And today's presentation is whether or not it is right for me as an incorporated physician. But before we get into some of the details, we'd like to remind you that it is extremely important that physicians do their own due diligence, their own research, that they discover what the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan can provide that this new HOOPP option cannot provide. We invite you to visit our website or to email us, either Dr. Tran or Jonathan, at the email addresses listed below. Now, it's very important to realize that physicians have always desired a stable and safe pension plan. This goes back many, many years. In fact, if you go back far enough in time, the very first RRSP that was ever created in 1957 was the result of pressure and lobbying from the Canadian Medical Association, because physicians were not given a chance to save through pension plans. And therefore, the government introduced the RRSP back in 1957. But because physicians were never truly given a true pension plan, there's a lot of pension envy that has built up over the decades. And so a lot of folks are asking, well, if I'm a physician and I want to save money for retirement, what are my options? What exactly can I do if I'm trying to put money aside for a rainy day when I'm no longer able to practice medicine? And some of the options that are currently available in the marketplace include just saving money through your corporation. If you have a medical professional corporation, you can always open up a non-registered corporate investment account. You can use insurance. You can use an RRSP. You can use a tax-free savings account. You could join this HOOPP plan. There are other types of solutions out there. There are some defined contribution pension plans and so forth. Or you can use a individual pension plan or even a personal pension plan, as is the case with the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. So there are multiple roads in the road, forks in the road with multiple paths. And this makes it very challenging for physicians to figure out which path they should follow if they're trying to accumulate money for retirement. So as for HOOPP, I've already mentioned that it stands for Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan. It's been around since 1960. It has lots and lots of plan members, hundreds of thousands of plan members. It used to be called the Hospitals of Ontario Pension Plan because it was really designed to provide pensions to people working within hospitals that were not doctors, like the nurses and like some of the the service staff that keeps our hospitals running. And unfortunately, because of its history, HOOPP wasn't really designed with physicians in mind, especially incorporated physicians, because incorporated physicians in Ontario only came in the early 2000s. From 1960 until the early 2000s, physicians were not allowed to incorporate. And as such, they were not allowed to be in a pension plan. So HOOPP wasn't designed with incorporated physicians in mind. It's more of an afterthought. And HOOPP is a multi-employer pension plan. Contrary to some of the plans that you might be familiar with, like the General Motors pension plan or pension plans of large companies where there's a single employer, HOOPP is a multi-employer pension plan. So a lot of companies that are, or employers that are unrelated to one another, all band together and participate in a single pension structure. They each plug in as it's called a participating employer. And based on the salaries that they pay their employees, they make contributions to a central pool, which is the HOOPP pension fund. And all that money accumulates in a single account and is invested by the portfolio managers that the administrators of the HOOPP plan have appointed to look after growing the money. But how does it actually work? Well, one of the things is that it offers a defined benefit pension. So it says to the plan members, whether you're a nurse or some other hospital employee or now a physician, it will say, you will make some contributions to the central pool. We will manage the money. And when you retire, based on a formula, we will provide you the fixed pension in retirement. And this pension is usually indexed. So if the cost of living goes up and if inflation goes up, the actual amount that you were promised also keeps up with inflation. And the monies that are contributed by these employers, whether it's a medical professional corporation or a hospital, are part of one single pool, which is what I mentioned earlier, the pension fund, and are invested by professionals across a variety of asset classes. Just like the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board or the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, OMERS, or the Teachers Pension Plan of Ontario, all of these large pension plans have very sophisticated investment solutions to grow the money that's being contributed by each employer. So it's a very different kind of animal or structure than what people are used to when they're using an RRSP, for example, where it's a single account and all you're dealing is with one portfolio manager or investment advisor. Now, the question that a lot of people have asked us since it was announced that HOOPP would open up its doors to incorporate physicians starting on January 2nd, 2025, is HOOPP attractive? And the answer is yes. It is a very attractive pension plan. It has a stellar record in terms of its investment returns. It has exceeded its own benchmark for the past 20 years. It's developed surplus assets. It's got more money in its pension fund than it needs to pay out in the form of promised pensions. It's very well diversified. The administration is quite incredible. Their website is user-friendly for a pension plan. Um, if there was any kind of public sector pension plan that is really attractive, it would be HOOPP. So that's a very good news for those who are looking at this structure. The problem is not that though. The problem is that incorporated physicians have multiple needs, not just an accumulation. Of course, every doctor wants to make sure that they're putting enough money aside in, an account or in a pension so that when they're no longer practicing medicine, that pot of money can replicate a large part of the income that they used to collect when they were working. That's what a pension is supposed to be. So that's what I call the accumulation. But that's not the only thing that physicians have to contend with. Physicians also have tax efficiency needs. Remember, a huge percentage of physicians in Ontario are incorporated, have a medical professional corporation. So the income that's earned by OHIP or other sources goes through the corporation first and is taxed in the corporation. And then there are other taxes that have to be contended with. So there is a tax problem that physicians have to deal with, not just an accumulation problem. There's also a need for flexibility and control. Many of the physicians that we've dealt with over the years like to have control over how their money is invested. They don't want to just trust someone, even if that person has a good track record. And there's also some estate needs in terms of what happens when you pass away. Does your money go to your children? Does it go to your children tax-free? Does it go to your children taxable in a taxable manner? Or does it not go to your children at all? And so the estate needs, the intergenerational wealth transfer, is a major preoccupation of most of the physicians that we've been dealing with. Of course, if you don't have any children, maybe that is not as important, but maybe you have a charity that you'd like to give your money to. So this is important. And tonight's presentation is really, where does HOOPP fall short for incorporated professionals or physicians when it comes to these 4 needs that we've identified. So let's talk about the first one. In terms of the taxes, the physician that's incorporated cannot put as much money and therefore cannot tax deduct as much under HOOPP as they would be if they had, for example, an individual pension plan or personal pension plan under the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan umbrella. This is because from a tax perspective, there are certain contributions that are not permitted under the HOOPP structure. And I'll go through the 3 key ones here. They're listed on this page. The first one is that there's no terminal funding available under HOOPP when a physician decides to retire early and to turn on the pension, to say, you know what, I'd like this pension to start paying me now. Maybe because I want to practice fewer hours. I don't want to take on as many shifts. I'd like to enjoy my life a little bit more. Maybe my health isn't as great as it used to be when I was in my 20s. So I need more money to retire, but I don't want to put on as many hours. So if you are using an individual pension plan or a personal pension plan, you can do what's called terminal funding. You can turn on the pension ahead of schedule and enjoy an unreduced early retirement pension that's also indexed to inflation, so it keeps up with the cost of living. And in order to provide yourself with such a generous pension, your corporation has the ability to contribute dollars to your own individual pension plan. This mechanism cannot operate under HOOPP in the same manner because the HOOPP plan has been in surplus for the past 20 years. There is no deficit to speak of. So if you wanted to turn on a pension ahead of schedule from HOOPP, you can do that, but your corporation would not get a tax deduction. And when we're talking about terminal funding, we could be talking about $500,000, $1.5 million of extra corporate tax deductions that your corporation can enjoy, which is impossible under the HOOPP structure. So that's one big tax minimization strategy that is no longer available for those who decide to use HOOPP. The other one is the special payments. So under pension, if the assets invested inside the pension plan generate a return that's below 7.5%, we have the ability, or your medical corporation has the ability to top up the pension fund and to make additional tax deductible contributions, which we call special payments. Well, obviously, if the HOOPP plan has been in surplus for the past 20 years, it's above the 7.5% return. So there are no tax deductions available. So year after year, there are fewer tax deductions available under the special payments than there would be with your own individual pension plan or personal pension plan. And that really, over the long haul, really amounts to a lot. And finally, under the individual pension plan or personal pension plan rules, the percentage of your salary that you're allowed to contribute to the pension plan rises with age. It starts roughly around 18% when you're much younger, and then it plateaus at almost 30% by the time you hit age 64. Well, that is not the case under the HOOPP system. Under the HOOPP system, there's a fixed amount that's contributed for all members, regardless of their age. So that means that when you're comparing the two, the IPP or PPP can put more money over time, therefore claim more tax deductions than under the HOOPP plan. Dr. Tran?
Yeah, JP, I just want to jump in here. So this last point is important because just think of two physicians, for example, a physician who's 40 years old versus a physician who's 60 years old. The physician who's 60 years old obviously will retire earlier, right, in the next 5 to 6 years. So that physician should be able to contribute more to prepare for retirement in comparison to the person who's 40 years old. And if you contribute more, and when I say you, I mean the MPC, the Medicine Professional Corporation, contributes more, it also takes a bigger tax deduction. So this is why we're talking about taxes. So this type of system is allowed under an IPP and PPP structure, where, as you say, JP, that contribution it takes into account age, whereas in the HOOPP you cannot do that. So the physician who's 40 years old and the physician who's 60 years old will contribute the exact same amount. But intuitively, it doesn't make sense because the physician who's 60 years old will retire much sooner, therefore needing more funds to fund his retirement. And so in the IPP PPP structure, that can happen, but not in the HOOPP structure.
That is correct. So let's move on now away from pure tax, which is a huge problem for physicians, and move on to the next set of problems, which is the loss of control over the assets. Obviously, not every doctor wants to be totally in control of how their money is invested, but many are. Many have worked extremely hard for that money. Many have had a bit of time to learn about finance, have developed some good relationships with people in the financial industry, and they want to say, by joining HOOPP, you're giving up all that control because you're trusting that the money managers for this plan know what they're doing. And of course, they know what they're doing. But it still means a loss of control. It also means that because you're no longer in control of your investments, you cannot no longer work with your individual financial advisor. There are certain things that can be done under an IPP or PPP with the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan that you cannot do under. For example, if you wanted to overlay some access to perma life insurance policies, as an alternative to stocks and bonds and GICs and other things inside your pension plan, that is not something that you could do under HOOPP. Because first of all, they don't do that, but second of all, you have no control anyway. You cannot dictate how your own wealth is going to be accumulated. So a lot of innovative structures which allow you to diversify away from stock market risks are lost when you give up control. Then there's also, and this is probably the most important portion of tonight's presentation, is the loss of control over surplus assets. So what is surplus? Surplus is any dollar inside of a pension plan, a defined benefit pension plan, that is actually not needed to pay a promised benefit. So I'll give you a quick example. Imagine that your pension, that your promise is $100,000 a year, and you use round numbers. And in order to sustain $100,000 a year for the next X number of years of life, you need at least $3 million accumulated inside the pension plan. That's what we call the committed value. But let's assume that the money managers have done such a great job that at the point that you're starting to draw on your pension, there's not $3 million, there's $4 million or $3.5 million in the pension fund. The first $3 million is the committed value. That's what's needed to pay your $100,000 a year pension. Anything above that, whether it's $500,000 or $1 million, that's what we call surplus. Remember, surplus, any dollars not needed to pay a promised pension. Well, surplus can arise in a number of ways. The classic one is the one I just talked about, when you're generating returns that are above what's needed to fund the stream of promised benefits, right? But that's not the only way. The other way that surplus arises is when the liabilities, meaning the stream of pension, the $100,000 a year promise, is extinguished because of death. So if you were promised $100,000 a year, but you pass away, let's say you pass away with your spouse, the pension plan has done its job. It promised you $100,000 for the rest of your life, and then it was going to pay a survivor pension to your spouse, but you don't have a spouse, you both die. So any money left in the plan is surplus because it's a dollar not needed to pay a pension. There's no pension to pay anymore. The pension plan has discharged its legal obligations towards the plan members. The big problem with the HOOPP, and it's not just HOOPP, I don't want to pick on HOOPP, all the defined benefit plans in Canada that are not IPPs or PPPs have this fundamental problem, is that while they're great if you're receiving a pension during what's called a guarantee period, this is usually 5 years after you start drawing your first pension, your first payment. If you die within the 5-year guarantee period, there's no issue. The pension plan will continue to pay the remaining monthly payment amounts to your designated beneficiaries, typically your children. But if you die outside the guarantee period with your spouse, think of the proverbial car accident. That's it. The pension plan has done exactly what it promised it would do. You're outside the guarantee period. So all your money, your $3 million committed value that I gave in my previous example, that money now stays inside the pension fund. It becomes an actuarial gain. It becomes part and parcel of the pool, and it stays in the pool so other plan members can enjoy your money. So this is a massive, massive headache if your objective is to pass wealth to your children. So that's the real problem. The second problem is that since the physicians inside of HOOPP do not control surplus, if you ever needed access to that surplus for emergencies, if you needed a medical need, if you let's say someone said, we think you're going to die in the next 6 years, but the first year or the next 6 years, your health will be pretty good. So if you want to go do a tour around the world, you can do that. Say, well, where am I going to get the money? Well, there's $3 million of surplus, $1 million surplus in your pension plan. I can't access it. That's HOOPP's money. It's not my money. But if you had your own pension plan, your own IPP or PPP under the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan, you would have access to that surplus. So for people who have no control over surplus, this is a real loss of freedom. Dr. Tran? Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to come back to the previous slide, I want to tell people what this really means, because unless we give a case, people don't understand or realize the significance of this. So earlier you said that everybody contributes to this plan to one pool based on their salary. And pool and HOOPP was initially created for people who work in hospitals, nurses, RPNs, medical technologists, lab technologists, administrative assistants, food and dietary, right? And if I just take, for example, the salary of a nurse, of a regular nurse who's in their mid-career, we're talking about 80,000 a year salary. So I'm just going to give an example that her contribution to HOOPP is $6,000 a year. That's just a fictitious number. But the physician who joins this, so the MPC may be giving the physician a T4 of 200,000. And for 200,000, the contribution may be mere 30,000 as an example. So you've got a nurse who pays into HOOPP 6,000 per year, and the MPC who pays into HOOPP 30,000 a year. And you do that over 30 years. So the nurse would have paid 180,000 or contributed 180,000, but the physician would have contributed 900,000, right? So you understand the significance of that. But I'm going to take it one step further to what you said, JP. We have no control over the surplus, but there's also no intergenerational wealth transfer. So imagine that physician who lost his wife and then dies, and then all that money that was in there, the 900,000 plus the growth, plus the inflation and all that, we're talking about a lot of money. So that physician contributed to the pool much more than the nurse ever will, but there is no option for that physician to transfer that money to their children beyond the guaranteed period. So this particular loss of control over surplus is major and significant for physicians who have MPCs. And that's why, JP, you said out of this presentation, this slide is probably the most important and relevant to incorporated physicians.
Yep. The next category of issues with the HOOPP plan is that it's governed by the Pension Benefits Act of Ontario, which is the statute that governs these pension plans. And what it does is that it limits the flexibility that physicians have as to whether or not they want to contribute to the plan. It forces mandatory contributions. Whether the MPC has other uses for that cash for them. There may be in a given year, the medical corporation might say, gee, my son or my daughter just bought a new home. I'm going to transfer some money over to them instead of putting into the pension plan because I wanted to have a down payment. Well, if you're told this is how much you have to contribute each year to HOOPP, you don't have that flexibility. In fact, if you don't contribute, you might even be fined by the pension plan administrators. So that's a problem. The other problem that comes, Dr. Tran?
Yeah, sorry, JP. I just wanted to jump in. This is significant again for physicians, the fact that the contribution is mandatory. So I'll give you an example, and this really happened to a friend of mine. So the physician suffers a stroke and cannot work for the next 6 months to 12 months until they recover. So the physician who's now part of HOOPP has an obligation to contribute. But during that year, that physician did not work or did not work a lot. And so therefore, despite that, the MPC still needs to contribute to this pension plan, but there is not much income for in that year because that physician needed to recuperate from the stroke. And so it leaves quite a bit of financial burden and stress to that physician who now is made to contribute to a plan when at a time he was not able to make enough money through the corporation. And so you were talking about the physician who wants to help the son or the daughter buy a house, but it could be as simple as a physician falling ill and not being able to work that year, but still having to contribute. So it has significant stress and burden on that physician if they're part of this plan that is not very flexible.
Yeah, I mean, this slide is, labeled loss of flexibility. This is one type of flexibility that's lost. You're forced to contribute whether you have the money or not that year. But the second one is you also, because the Pension Benefits Act locks in your money, it locks it in, meaning that you can't withdraw it unless you're drawing an income, a retirement pension. That in emergencies to your pension asset is limited, very limited, because now we have to worry about the pension benefits locking in those. So we've already talked about there's no control over the surplus. This is of course a big problem. This was a previous slide. But also, even if you decide to leave HOOPP and said, that's it, I'm no longer participating in this multi-employer plan, I want to do my own thing, and you want to pull your money out of the central pension plan, you have to send it to a locked-in retirement account, a LIRA, typically. There are some other portability options like buying an annuity, but most people will use the LIRA. And there are two problems with the LIRA. The first one, of course, is that your money's locked in. Now, there are certain exceptions to that. If you're over age 55, you're allowed to unlock up to 50% of your LIRA. So that gives you a little bit of relief, but half your money continues to be locked in and inaccessible. And then there's a tax problem because the commuted value, sort of the pool of money you're trying to yank out of the HOOPP pension fund to transfer into LIRA, the tax laws don't allow you to take all your money tax sheltered. Only a portion of that is allowed to transfer into the LIRA with no tax. A chunk of that commuted value, I gave the example of a $3 million commuted value in my earlier example. So there might be $500,000 of the $3 million that cannot go into the LIRA, that has to be paid out in the form of a cash payment. So that could expose you to a $250,000 tax bill. So there's tax problems and there's locking in problems. And all of that is creating a loss of flexibility that we maintain with either an IPP or PPP under the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. So to summarize, HOOPP was not designed for incorporated professionals. It's okay if you're an employee of the hospital, but if you also run a taxable corporation, this was not designed for it. It's sort of an afterthought. And HOOPP does not meet the needs of physicians when it comes to tax efficiency, flexibility and control, and the estate needs. I would argue that for accumulations, accumulating enough money for retirement, I think it does a very good job. But it doesn't meet all the other critical needs that we've identified. So it is a very partial solution. Yes, Jonathan?
So why is HOOPP doing this? Why are they suddenly opening it up to the physicians and everybody else to entice them and encourage them to say, hey, we're open for business. Please come join our plan. Like, why now after, like you said, 50 years of this plan being available?
So, JP, maybe I can help answer that. So it's not that HOOPP is all of a sudden opening up in doors and say, I'm open the business to the incorporated physicians. So what happens is that physicians have been asking for a pension plan for a long time, as I mentioned. And the associations have said, well, which is the pension plan that does that for healthcare employees? So they went and looked for HOOPP and said and asked HOOPP to start accepting physicians. And HOOPP says, well, we have a strategy, we have a plan. Let's just do it this way. And that's why HOOPP is opening their doors and on the request of these medical associations. To your point, Jonathan, why now and why? Well, why now is because there's enough physicians who says, hey, I deserve a pension plan. Why not me? And so we've gone to a point where the associations have to do something. But to your point, we are now adding on a piece onto HOOPP where we were never designed to be part of them. So their structure was never structured to accept incorporated professional corporations because all these drawbacks were never designed for us. They were there for the employees of the hospital. So that's why we find ourselves adding on to something that wasn't prepared for us.
So, you know, if I'm funding, like this is a quote here, if I'm funding my own pension, there's no matching. Like the government isn't giving me extra money. All of it comes from my medical professional corporation. So if I'm funding my own pension with many inflexibilities, all the stuff we talked about, locking in, mandatory funding, you know, why am I joining HOOPP? Like, why would I do that? What's the point? If you're going to be paying for your own plan, why choose one that has the most limitations for incorporated professionals? That makes very little sense. Oh, Dr. Tran, yeah.
Yeah, so not only am I funding my own pension plan, I am subsidizing other people's pension plan. As I mentioned in my example, the nurse may be contributing 6,000 a year, but the physician is contributing 30,000 a year. So 5 times more. So in fact, the physician, the MPC who's joining HOOPP is subsidizing other people's pension plan. And so if physicians have to pay for their own pension plan anyways, because there's no matching from the hospital and there's no matching from the government, why would I choose a plan that has all these limitations and in which I have to subsidize others? There are other solutions in the market.
And the obvious solution, which we kept talking about, is having the medical professional corporation set up either an individual pension plan or a personal pension plan, can appoint BMO Nesbitt Burns to invest the assets and take advantage of all the tax deductions that are permitted by the Income Tax Act, not just a couple of them, including those that we talked about, being able to put more money year after year above and beyond what's permitted by HOOPP based on your age, so that the 60-year-old puts a lot more money than the 40-year-old. Doing special payments. There's nothing that says you have to take risks. You could invest in very, very safe securities that never lose money. Even if the market crashes, you don't lose any money because you're in safe assets. The rate of return will be less than 7.5%. So now all of a sudden, your company can take a 26% write-off by doing these special payments that we're talking about. Or if you decide to retire early, ahead of schedule, and now instead of paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, the medical corporation redirects that money into the pension plan under the terminal funding rules that we talked about briefly. So all of these are examples of tax efficiencies that are available under either an IPP or a PPP that is missed with HOOPP. And then that's without talking about the intergenerational wealth transfer, being able to pass that wealth to your children, either on a tax sheltered basis if they're working in your business and part of your plan, or on a taxable basis if they're not part of your company. But in either case, that money goes to your children. Jonathan, I think you wanted to say something at this point.
Yeah, and great summary there. Also, just wanted to highlight what you mentioned before about the insurance piece, about a complementary strategy and a different asset class to be able to even explore that, as opposed to the inflexible investment strategy through the HOOPP program and loss of flexibility.
That's great. So to wrap it up, in terms of next steps, I think that now that people are aware as to what the rules are, again, I reiterate what I said at the very beginning of this presentation. Do your own due diligence. Do not become a sucker. Discover what the CPPP can provide that HOOPP cannot provide. Visit our website, take a look, talk to people, book a meeting either with Dr. Tran or with Jonathan at BMO Elizabeth Burns, and do an illustration. Put the math together on a piece of paper and you'll see what you're missing out on. And after you've had all of the information, then it's much easier to make an informed decision. So that's what I recommend to all physicians that are investigating all these different alternatives. I think it's important to do the due diligence and to really look at the numbers and to speak to professionals who know pension law, know all the rules, and can provide meaningful advice. So that's all I wanted to say. Dr. Tran, Jonathan, you want to wrap it up?
So I just want to reiterate two concepts. The first one is the concept of due diligence. You know, in medicine, we talk about educated consent, right? Informed consent. That's what we use in terms of our lingo. Before someone goes through surgery, especially brain surgery, you know, we discuss the pros and the cons and the complications and alternatives. What if I didn't go through surgery? What would be the impact? And understanding all that before signing on the dotted line is important for our patients. And it's important for us as physicians to explain properly. And now this is no different. This is our turn to do our own due diligence and informed decision. It is our turn to find out the pros and the cons, the impacts, but also what is the alternative? What options exist out there if I do not join HOOPP? Maybe there are things that are better, and I argue that there are. The next thing is about, you know, talking to experts, talking to people who actually do the work. So if you're talking about pensions, you know, talking to a pension lawyer. If you're talking about investing, and you're talking about strategy and financial planning, talk to Jonathan or someone like Jonathan, right? It's important to get the knowledge from the experts. And you know what? Like operating a brain is complicated things. Trying to understand pension is also a complicated thing. So definitely seek the advice of experts. So with that, JP, Jonathan, do you have any things to add?
No, this was great, gentlemen. Really appreciate you, Dr. Tran and JP, for coming on board. This is a huge tidal wave that has just been launched by HOOPP and the industry, and I think it's important that we get ahead of things to then educate the physicians so that their financial health is more secure and optimized in order for them to then provide better patient care, ultimately in the end for society.
Well, Jonathan, this is why we're doing it, right? We're doing it
Right.
so that we can help physicians achieve financial wellness. And when they achieve financial wellness, they will achieve wellness. And that will translate into better patient care. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Thank you. So with that, we will end the webinar here.